But Shiv, perhaps if we could just start off with the very first question, and it's absolutely great to be talking to you about leadership at a time when I think India in particular really needs leadership. And that's the first thing that anyone who is here, looks around, looks at what's happening in government, looks at what's happening even in corporate India, says we need leadership. So yes, you have found absolutely the right thing. But tGELF itself, why tGELF? What made you think of it?
When I was at Brown University, Vikram, I did a course in philosophy of education. And it really changed my life, that course, because I realized that the great teachers like Dewey and so on, who had set in motion this whole educational model, which started in England and then rolled out globally across the world, was like a plane flying with one engine. It was based on rational thought, it was based on the external world, and the internal world was developed slightly indirectly, or through religion, through religious education, going to church and going to schools that had a strong church affiliation or religious affiliation, or through sports, where teamwork and other things were developed. There was some internal work that was done. And I felt that our ancient traditions in this country had spent a lot of time thinking about the internal education of the mind, body, intellect, soul, spirit, whatever one calls it. There had been a huge emphasis on that. And the teaching methodologies of looking up to your teacher in a small group and watching how he lived and emulating and learning through that process. And I felt actually that we needed to blend those two traditions to really get the education system up to the proper levels. And I remember at that time I wrote a paper saying all this to my teacher at Brown. It was the final paper. And she wrote, "I totally disagree," but she gave me an A, which I felt was what it's all about, to have a point of view, to allow one to lead. And from that day on, I started thinking, and as I traveled around the world, and I've been fortunate to travel all around the world and work all around the world, I realized that actually this leadership gap is really a global issue. All over the world, leadership, the word has been bandied around as something that is about material success, fame, power, etc., rather than about the real values that create or that allow great leaders to thrive. Leaders like Gandhi or Mandela, as Dr. Karan Singh spoke about. And so I felt that this is something I wanted to start. I wanted to start a program that would look for, at the school level, talent. Just like one looks at the Olympics and looks for sporting talent. One looks for a good swimmer. One has swimming races at school. One finds the child that's naturally talented. One then identifies that child, puts that child into a training camp for swimming, and then they become part of the Indian team or the US team or whatever. I felt that similarly, there should be a program that searches for exceptional young talent that has a natural affinity for what I consider to be great leadership. And then that talent should be brought together, made to collaborate, and made to grow, given an opportunity to grow. Whatever background they came from, wealthy, poor, from whichever country in the world. And then the question I asked myself was, what is great leadership? Because that itself is a fundamental question that, and I spent quite a lot of time thinking about that. And as I looked at all the qualities that one talks about of leaders of all kinds in business and politics and various things, I found that, in my opinion, great leadership had some core features that one could identify in someone that we called a great leader. Intelligence was the baseline. That was taken for granted. Leadership qualities, defined as a basket of various things, including communication skills, ability to pull people together, and ability to create trust, ability to convince, grit, all those things, was another category. And one could see that in young children at schools. One could see leadership qualities emerge. The second pillar was ethics. And I felt that there are lots of leaders for whom ethics is really no more than something to say to the media, but it doesn't live within their spirits in a deep sense. And I felt that was a huge tragedy. And we needed to find leaders who actually had ethics as part of their core constitution. So ethics became the second pillar. The third pillar for me was altruism. You could have a leader that's ethical, but that's selfish, that cares about himself or herself and says, I'm ethical, I'm a leader, I have my company, and really I couldn't care less what happens in the rest of the world. But that was not enough. So we felt that the third pillar, which is altruism, was fundamental. People that cared more about the world than about just their own petty micro world. And finally, all of those things were great, but if that leader didn't have the ability to execute well, that was still not enough. Because one could talk about it, write books about it, but at the end of the day, it's the doers, it's the people that are able to execute well that one is searching for. So we created these 4 pillars: leadership, ethics, altruism, and bias for action. And I was very fortunate to meet Mrs. Ishwaran, and we immediately clicked on a lot of these thoughts, and we found that we had known each other for many lives, and she immediately said, I'm happy to work with you on this thing. And I had no experience in schools, in teaching, in the school systems here and what it would take, how to develop a curriculum, and all these fundamental things, how to build this kind of an organization, how to gain the trust of teachers and students. And really, she was the engine, and the team she's built has been an absolutely fantastic and superb team. And there we have a team of missionaries that are devoted to this work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
But you know, if I could ask you the question about the sort of people you're taking this message to. Now, these are kids. They're kids in class 9, class 10, class 11, class 12. They're being told constantly that, look, what you've got to do right now is you've got to work very hard, study very hard, get the marks, you've got to go to college. That's what really your focus needs to be. So sit, study, 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 get marks, marks, marks. That's what you've got to be. That's the way you have to go. And now you're coming and saying, yes, but you know, ethics and altruism and be an actor, you know, all of those things are fine. But how do you convince them, and how do you convince their parents that this is something they should spend time on?
We're not actually trying to convince anyone. That's not what we're trying to do.
You're getting convinced automatically.
What we're trying to do is, we've got a curriculum that we developed with Harvard University and Columbia Teachers College, and Bill Godelli is here, who's been a co-partner in this work with us for the last 6 years. And this curriculum was to train the teachers to work with the young students in class 8, 9, and 10 to expose them to these questions. A question like, Hitler was a great leader, Gandhi was a great leader, discuss. And what we found is, after 3 years of this program, there are some children that are that have a natural affinity and are drawn to the work we're doing, that find they're like ducks to water. They don't need to be convinced about anything. They come towards us, and they're drawn to the messages that we have in our program, and the values that we represent, and the ambitions of our program. And so we don't need to convince anyone. If anything, we have to convince some teachers to take on a little extra work. But the teachers get convinced very quickly when they see the type of work we're doing.
And at the end of the day, when it comes down to those, sorry to labor this point a little bit, but when it comes down to the outcomes of all of this, you're probably training and you're getting people to take on these really useful leadership positions, and it's probably great for society and the rest of it. But at the end of the day, do you find that people who are taking on a course like this, taking on the message that you're trying to tell them, at the end of the day, they also succeed? They also succeed in getting to good colleges, in getting the marks, in being able to get the results that they need?
I think that the group that's in this room really speaks for itself. Certainly, I would never be able to match up to any of them by any means, whether it's in terms of academics, intelligence, or anything else. And we have young people that are at, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Brown, UPenn, Cornell, MIT, IITs, etc. So for them, academics actually is easy. All of them have done extremely well academically, and they want something more. And what we've been able to do, and really it's a matter of asking them rather than asking me, how have they managed to do that? Because these are all young people that have seen the academics as a fundamental building block, but are looking for more, and looking to contribute more, and looking to grow more. And that is what we're looking for.
Is there a problem or a challenge that you face when you're dealing with the specific nature of academics here in India, especially at the school level and unfortunately in many colleges as well, where it tends to measure, it tends to reward a different type of skill. It rewards sit and mug and spill it out and don't really use your brain too much. Is that a challenge that you have to find a way to overcome?
I think it's a challenge, but we're lucky because we're one step removed from that. So we train the teachers, and then the teachers work with the young students in the different classes, 8, 9, and 10, and we keep working on training the teachers. So the teachers have to take on that challenge. How do they add to the already heavy workload with this additional curriculum? And we've made the curriculum reasonably light, because really what we're trying to do is to use the curriculum as a means to identify this leadership talent. So although everyone in class 8, 9, and 10 is exposed to this curriculum in small or big doses, the real thing is in class 10 and 11 to identify these young leader potential, and then in class 12, when they graduate, to really take them into our program, and that's when they really start their journey of leadership, which will probably last 20 or 30 years. So another way of putting it is, it's like looking at a huge basket of seeds and acorns and trying to figure out which are the seeds and acorns that will grow into banyan trees and sequoias.
We saw a little bit of that in the film, but perhaps if you could just take us through it in slightly greater detail. How does the process itself work? You're starting off and looking at kids in class 9, class 10, then what happens? What is the next step?
So in class,
what do you do with them year
so in class 8, 9, and 10, there's a curriculum. The teachers have been trained, and they're exposing the children to the issues of leadership, the issues of responsibilities of leadership, communication skills, and all the other things that a leader should be equipped with to lead. And so what happens with that foundation is actually something that's very positive. I got a call from the principal, the vice principal of Padma Sheshadri in Chennai, and she said to me, you know, your program has made such a difference because the students at school are now looking for different types of leaders to lead even the school. They're not looking for the most popular boy or popular girl. They're looking for leaders that have these values. That's what they're looking for. So that already has a good effect. But then in class 10 and 11, in the last 2 years, in 11 and 12, we take the best of those 10% and we give them a more experienced and outward bound type of program. We might send them to you might send them abroad to a leadership program. We might send them to some camp, a leadership camp or something else, to some service opportunities, and we see how they do. And then as these young students, we mentor them. An example is Sanya. You saw something about her. We started working with her when she was in class 9, and she's now in the Huntsman program at Wharton, which is the most difficult program to get into. She just got the Benjamin Franklin Scholarship, so congratulations, Sanya. I just found out yesterday. And so we have extremely talented children. In class 9, she would never have thought of going abroad. So we mentor them and say, look, if you really want to lead on a global level, you must expose yourself to the world and look at the world as your home. So that's the process. And then in class, once they get to college, then it's a much more active mentoring. You know, we have people talking to them all the time. We're in touch with them in terms of their curriculum, what they want to do for summer jobs. We have the annual conference. We get them together, because actually leadership is not an individual effort. Leadership is a team effort. And so by getting all these young students together, we're able to create a magic between them. And that magic, hopefully you will see later this evening in terms of some of the creation that we get them to do.
So you encourage them also to go abroad and to get that global exposure, and then you also presumably encourage them to do what you did, which is to go abroad and then come back to India eventually, and because Vikram, India needs the leaders.
Sure. Vikram, people ask me that question, and I honestly say to all the young leaders, it really doesn't matter where you are on this planet, because as long as you're doing the type of work that we expect from you, which is of the highest caliber, then it doesn't matter where you are on this planet, because this is your planet. Go and lead. If you're in Venezuela, Brazil, China, go and lead. And it will send out, they will be ambassadors for our country if they're from India, or there'll be resources from around the world that help our country or help the world. So from my point of view, I think it's the whole view of nation state as being a limiting factor. I understand the history of it, but I think if one looks out for the next 100 years, I think it's a very narrow worldview.
But talking about changing worldviews, you deal a lot with these kids who are really bright, really talented, and you know, do you think that the nature of them is also changing? Because if you look at the way kids are growing up right now, in the environment where they are, with the internet around them, distractions here and there, their ability to, for their interests to change from day to day, week to week, month on month, is that something that you think is something we should get used to? Because there used to be a time you used to be really interested in football and then you do football. You'd be really interested in something else and you do that and you'd stick to that for like years and years. Now it changes. Sometimes it changes every month. Are you noticing that as well?
I think that's inevitable because the options and the choices they have multiplied so much. When we were young at school here, there were hardly any choices. Krishi Darshan on TV and, you know, sort of football in the park outside our house or cricket. I mean, there were limited options. Today, these young people, first of all, the bombardment of internet and mobile devices and all kinds of other things allows them to have a very, to grow much faster than we did, to learn much more than we ever did, to have access to information on a global basis that we could never do, to maintain networks that we could never do. My daughter has friends in 30 or 40 countries who she's in touch with on Facebook. You know, I could never have imagined that when I was 15 or 14 at that age. So I think the world has changed and we should change with it. I think change is fundamental. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing because these children are becoming globalists through technology. I think the key issue is what is inside. Do they have the spiritual gravitas? Do they have the values? Do they have the strength of character? Do they have the discipline? Those are the issues. And that I don't think changes from century to century. I think that's more of an internal issue that some children have more of and some children have less of.
Right. Shiv, I'm going to in a couple of minutes just see if anybody in the audience has a particular question that they want to ask of you as well. But before I do that, can I just ask you about the question that I started with, which is what seems to be the crisis of leadership in the country. It's going to take a long while before these kids actually grow up to become prime ministers and the others. So till then we have to deal with 81-year-old prime ministers and all sorts of other leaders who aren't necessarily doing much to lead. So any words of suggestion as to how we can get proper leadership back? And as I said, it's a crisis at every level, if you ask me. It's not just...
Yeah. I think sadly, the crisis goes very deep. And I think there is I think people are jaded. I think people have given up. When I talk to people, they go, oh, you're too idealistic. This is never going to work. How are people going to succeed if they don't go through this and that? Have you seen how business works? Have you seen how politics works? Have you seen the fundraising process? And this comes across the board. Young people, old people, I see it all the time. And it takes real strength to fight that pessimism and to say, no, it's possible. We can regenerate the shoots, the roots of this great nation. It's done it many times, and it lies within our human capital. So, do I think something's going to happen immediately? I don't. But this country is a 5,000-year-old history, so immediately means 50 years, 20 years, fine. You know, that's a short time for that to happen. But I think you'd be surprised by how fast things can happen. If someone had told me about the Arab Spring 5 years ago, I would have said, forget it. And I worked a lot in that part of the world. If someone had told me about, you know, the fall of the Soviet Union in 1987, I would have said, forget it. So things can happen very fast. It's about leadership, committed leadership, that work together as a team, that really want to change things, that are passionate, that are willing to face with courage the challenges that there are in society and to take them on.
But of course, what we are seeing here is a period where there was massive optimism, a sense that things were really changing. And then that turned into a mood of pessimism and despondency, which we are seeing right now. So I guess another U-turn is required at some point.
But I'll disagree with you, Vikram. I don't think there was massive optimism. I think there was massive economic optimism.
Yeah.
It was optimism of the elite.
Yeah.
It was optimism about growth rates, which is not what this is about.
But certainly when it came to looking at India and is India finally reaching its position in the world, there was a sense that yes, it's now going to start happening and then it'll go down everywhere.
Because of growth rates.
And that changed, yes.
Because of growth rates, because of economic development and so on. But fundamentally, was there optimism in terms of values? Did we all say, wow, this country is regenerating its values? Look at that leader. I look up to that leader. Look at that teacher. We have teachers like Aristotle, Socrates. Where do we have that caliber? Where is the recognition for the great role of teachers? We've started a prize for teachers, which started last night. We believe that teachers need to be recognized for their tremendous role in society.
So that perhaps brings me to the final point then, that while it's all very well that these kids are, I'm sure, going to do absolutely fantastically with their lives, it also comes to the point that you were talking about. It doesn't help if they are necessarily only doing it in a little bubble. If they are sort of in a little very happy, very secure, good bubble of themselves, and whatever they are doing is not affecting the vast mass of people, that then leaves also a question unanswered somewhere.
Sure. We do everything we can to not create any such bubble. And I think as the evening goes on, you'll see some of the work these young people are doing. A year ago, they took up some projects. Tonight, you'll see the next steps in those projects. These young people are extremely engaged in the world. And these people feel a huge responsibility for the world around them. And I think it's about social activism. It's about bypassing the political systems that are very rigid. I actually think it's about bypassing the educational system, which is very rigid, and actually finding this leadership quality and then allowing it to really grow and sprout and to do what it needs to do.
All right, let me see if somebody in the audience has a particular question that they want to ask.
So I think, you're probably so used to being asked, to talk about what you've done for this organization, what you've done for these students, what opportunities you've created for them. But I guess my question for you is, what have the students done for you? Is there something that has really touched you about a particular student's story that comes to mind? What have they made you think about differently?
I think that the greatest joy I get is actually watching these young people grow, and I'm constantly learning. Their initiative, their creativity, the way they look at the world. In our work, we end up spending a lot of time with people that are very jaded. And to spend time with these people and to see the optimism actually gives me great hope. There are many, many stories of my interaction with many of these young people and how they've opened my heart and opened my mind. And I think that I'm learning much more. I'm getting much more out of this than we're giving to them.
Great. Someone else?
I agree with your thoughts on an innate ability in leadership. My question to you is there a way to cultivate leadership in maybe students who don't initially show a natural ability? And if so, how would you do that?
I think that's an excellent question, because I often think to myself, if I had seen Gandhiji when he was 16 years old, would I have identified him as a leader? I would have identified him as ethical. I would have probably identified him as altruistic, but he was very shy. Would I have identified him as a leader at that point? Probably not. And hence, I am sure that many great potential leaders fall through the cracks. I think leadership is innate to some extent, but I do think that everyone's leadership qualities can be improved. And that is really what we do in class 8, 9, and 10. The program is designed to up the level of general leadership in all the students that care to participate and get involved in that program. We're doing it in Bhutan, we're doing it in Gabon, we're doing it in UAE, we're starting in Myanmar, and we're seeing the results. And perhaps it's better to ask the people that are at the front end about the results. So we have people from Bhutan here, the principals of the two schools, and maybe they could comment on that, on whether there's a general effect on students that may not be the greatest leaders, but whether there's a general impact. Perhaps I could ask one of the Bhutanese principals to speak about that. Or any principal, anyone who's here who has some experience with that. Because again, I'm not at the front end of that.
Hello everyone. I think when you look into the leadership programs in the school, we would see lots of changes in the school. The leadership program in the school is 3 years old in both the schools, but we can see lots of leadership qualities within the school. There are many, the school's discipline problems are solved through these leaderships. I think there are leaderships emerging within the schools. A few years back, for example, if I honestly speak, we have some problems with disciplinary issues. Now with these leadership program coming in, there are leaders, many student leaders coming up, and these leaders are actually helping us to solve the problems and make the students, make the school grow. So I see that there are lots of impact getting into this. It's just a 3 years old in the school. I think long run, I think we can see lots of changes coming from this program. Thank you.
Great. That sort of matches the point you were making. The gentleman here.
Thank you very much for interesting presentation, Shiv, and talking more about what you're doing. And I salute that you're giving up a lot of your time and energy into this project. But I'm sure that a lot of people sitting here, they're thinking, how can we get involved? Either financially, either giving their time or sharing the expertise and knowledge. So could you share some of the ways that to partner with tGELF, some of the initiatives that you're doing in India, across the world? What are the ways to partner with tGELF?
Yeah, we very firmly believe that this is not actually anything to do with the Khemka Foundation or with me personally. This is really our work, because this is our world. If we really want to make a difference in the lives of our children and in the lives of our population, of the people that aren't benefiting from this growth that we're talking about with the middle class and all the rest of it, then I think we really need to commit ourselves to finding the human capital that will lead the future of the planet. All of us need to do that. And great leadership rests on mentorship. So the first thing, the first way that anyone who wants to can get involved is to actually take a role of mentorship, to mentor these young leaders and get involved with that process. And we're setting up a mentorship platform to do that. The second thing, obviously, is to grow this globally, is to find the right partners, to find the right collaborators. And we're working with universities in the US, we're working with foundations around the world. We have about 30, 40 countries that want to start this program with us. We don't have the human capital to just do that, to grow that fast. We're looking at an online solution, which would be a selection engine to help disseminate the curriculum and then start selecting young leadership talent, and then the mentorship part. And the mentorship part requires not just an online methodology may work a little bit, given what's happening in the online world with Coursera, Udacity, and so on. But actually, it's about human contact and emulation and mentorship. So we think partners are very important in this program, and we're looking to everyone to help us do this, because it's not really our program. It's really a program for all of us together.
Right, perhaps one final question. Okay, gentleman there.
First of all, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be here at this fascinating conference. I was struck yesterday when there were the pictures on the big screen in the conference where you were juxtaposing, for example, Jack Welch and Mahatma Gandhi, or Stephen Jobs and who else was there? Einstein. And at the same time, last week there was an editorial in the New York Times by Peter Buffett, Warren Buffett's son, where he was decrying the merging of the business kind of language with the language of ethics and social activism and social change. And I'm wondering, what kind of message, do you see a conflict between business values as they are now and the need to create systematic change? And if so, what kind of message would you want to bring to your young leaders in this?
Rabbi, that's an excellent question. We're delighted to have you. Rabbi flew in from New York to join us to give some great wisdom to the young leaders, and has been very involved in the program, so we're very delighted to have him here. Thank you. And thank you for that question. Because actually, I often think that the materialistic model, the consumption model that we've developed, which is a young model. It's only in the last few hundred years that this model has really developed and brought huge wealth to the planet, huge wealth, taken many people out of poverty and created a society that can enjoy the fruits of that industrial revolution, has benefited on a planet of 7 billion people, probably 2 or 3 billion people, but left out a huge number of people. So for me, I actually think there's something fundamentally wrong with the business model. And hopefully, over the next few years, 10, 20, 30 years, people will bring their ideas and the collective wisdom to change the model. As Gandhiji said, there is enough on this planet for our needs, but not enough for our greed. So the question becomes, what is this model of continuous consumption and growth of consumption? I'm not convinced it's the right model. Now, at the same time, I think there's a lot of value in that. Organization, how to organize for growth, how to globalize, how to bring people together, create meritocracies, how to create wealth, to expend, to create social change. So there are lots of good things in this model. However, I think the model is broken. It doesn't work well. And I think the political models also don't work well. Democracy, which I deeply believe in, doesn't work all the time. Unless the people are ready for democracy, how can democracy work? If people pay money to buy votes, how can one call that democracy? So the question is, how does one get this right? And I think we're at a very critical junction in history, where with the advent of broadband, with the advent of new pedagogies of education, with the internet, with new ways of sending content and packaging content, with new gaming technologies, artificial intelligence technologies, I think in the next 20, 30 years, we're going to see massive changes in the world of education, where I think a boy in a village in Gabon will be able to pull down the best Harvard professors, the content, and study it and become a light. So I think the model will move from push and walled fortresses to an open, flat model, to a model which allows these young people to actually grow to their full potential. And that, I think, will change things fundamentally. So I think, as Peter said yesterday, I think there's an intellectual Arab Spring that's coming. And I think we need to be optimistic about that. And I think we need to challenge our young leaders to create that. We want them to be subversive. If all they do is join Goldman Sachs and McKinsey and become investment bankers and consultants and make lots of money and have a house in Malibu, I will be very disappointed with them. I want them to be subversive, and I think they can. And hopefully, we will see the results in 10, 20, 30 years.
Well, hopefully it's going to be even faster than that, because certainly some of the changes in models that you're talking about are already starting to happen right now. So, Shiv, it's been absolutely fantastic talking to you, and the work which you're doing is absolutely great. We need you to churn out those young leaders faster and faster and faster, because the country needs them and the world needs them, and let's hope that they actually are subversive and that they're able to make a massive change. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Vikram. Thanks so much.
Thank you, gentlemen. And Vikram, your being here and being inducted into tGELF cannot happen uneventfully. So may we have a little token here to mark this occasion?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
This is our first tGELF scholar, by the way. She just graduated from Yale. She did so well at Yale that the dean of Yale gave her a fellowship and said, please stay on for one more year and work with us. And she worked as the assistant to the vice dean at Yale for a year. She wants to change the world in terms of the environment. And she then got a full scholarship to go to Yale. And she said, no, I'm going to go to Stanford because I think I need to expand and grow. And she's now going to Stanford to study environmental engineering.